All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here today. Welcome to our free mini boot camp here at Lambda School. This is a great opportunity to learn a little bit, first of all, and then also see what Lambda School is all about. And if you enjoy what we build today, then definitely take a look at joining our school. All right. So today, we're going to be building a really fun calculator website. My name is Dustin Myers. I'm the lead web instructor for the full-time program here at Lambda School, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. I've been teaching at Lambda School for almost 3 years, so hopefully I get to see you in our class in the near future. As I mentioned, we're going to be building a calculator application. So this is an example of what we will have built by the end of today. Now the structure and the styling is all built for you. What we're going to be working on is the logic behind the math functions here that you see in a calculator. So there are a couple of tools that we're going to use for this mini boot camp. First is a platform called CodePen. If you go to codepen.io, this will be our code editor. And this is where we're going to be writing our code, building the JavaScript, and getting our calculator to actually function and work. We're also going to be using Slido. Slido is a question queue. And I'm also going to be running some polls throughout the hour here through this platform. Both of these links are in the description of the event. You can go to our live poll here. You can go to, let's see. This is the one I want. There we go. You can go to slido.com and type in the event number 8581, and that will get you to Slido. So I'll leave this up for just a second so you can jump on to Slido. When you get there, go ahead and answer the poll that we're going to pull up right now. So again, join at slido.com at number 8581. And tell me, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? We already got an answer. Not an engineer. That's awesome. Entrepreneur, great. Okay, looks like we're getting some people on Slido. Okay, so those are the two tools that we'll be using for today, codepen.io and Slido for our questions. So now, let's talk about what we're going to learn today. We're not going to learn HTML and CSS. Again, that's the structure and style for our website. Those are already completed. If you want to study those topics, you can look those up and study them online. There's a lot of resources online. Or come to Lambda School, and we teach HTML and CSS at the very beginning of our regular web program. Today's main focus is JavaScript. So after we're done today, you'll be able to use a few different JavaScript types. I'll explain what all this means in just a minute. Write and execute a JavaScript function. Detect a mouse click using JavaScript. So you'll be able to tell your website what to do when your user clicks the mouse on a button. We'll use if-then statements with conditions. You'll see what that means in just a minute here. And then you'll be able to update values with JavaScript math logic. So it seems like a lot, but we'll be able to get through this in an hour, and you'll have a up and running website. Let's jump to here. So what is JavaScript. JavaScript is a programming language that gives a website its interactivity. As we look at what we're building today, this calculator right here, the structure, the boxes, the buttons, the text, the numbers in each button or the characters here, all of that is defined and built in a language called HTML. And that's all of this right here. The styling, the colors, what happens when we hover over a button and it changes colors, the font that we're using, the font size, all of that is built already for you in CSS. Those are two of the main languages of the web. Two layers of our website cake here. The third layer is JavaScript. What happens when we start clicking on these buttons? What happens when we fill out a form? Let's take a look at some other examples here. Displaying content updates like Facebook, interactive maps, animated graphics, whether they're 2D or 3D, scrolling video jukeboxes, lots of different things we can do with JavaScript. So we're going to learn a little bit of that today. All right, our first objective, what are JavaScript types? In order to build our calculator, we have to understand a couple concepts with JavaScript. And the first concept we're going to talk about is JavaScript types, data types. The first data type that we're going to talk about in JavaScript is a string. A string is a line of text or characters surrounded by quotes. So we can tell our browser when we're writing our JavaScript code that we want it to display a line of text or a group of characters, and we can specify that by using a JavaScript string. So that's one data type. Another data type are numbers. Here's some examples here. Numbers are, well, they're just a number, what you think of as numbers. These data types, we don't use quotes. One thing that's really interesting in JavaScript, I'm going to pull this up here. One thing that's really interesting with JavaScript is that okay, had to fix my screens. Is that numbers and these JavaScript types can be a little bit tricky. So let's say we take a number, the number 14. When we execute this code within our computer, it's going to spit out our number 14. We can execute a line of JavaScript that's a string, and it's going to kick out, it's going to execute this line of code, and it's going to return our string. We can use numbers, and we can do some math operations with them. And you can see that our JavaScript engine inside our browser will execute this, and it will evaluate to the number 5. Now watch this. I'm going to take the string 2 instead of the number 2, and I'm going to add it to the string 3, and look what we get. Instead of doing math on this, what we're telling the browser to do is take this character that's within a string and combine it with this string over here. So when you combine the characters 2 and 3 together, you get 23. Just like this, if we were to say hello plus space world, we would get these two strings combined into a single string. Now this is going to come into play later on with our calculator. So I just wanted to demonstrate why it's important to understand what JavaScript types are. So if something is surrounded by quotes, this signifies a string, And when it's not surrounded by quotes, if it's a number, that signifies that it is a different JavaScript type, that it's a number. Okay, finally, the last JavaScript type that we're going to look at today is a function. A function is a block of code designed to perform a particular task. You can kind of think of it as a machine that takes some inputs and it will output something. That the machine, when you give it something, when it takes in those inputs, it's executing its particular task. And a function can be executed when something in our code invokes it or calls that function with parentheses. So here's an example. If we had a function called SumFunction, we could call that function or invoke that function. We could tell it to perform its task by adding parentheses right behind the function name. And that tells our browser, which is running our JavaScript code, to go find that function and execute it. Tell that function to perform its particular task. All right, just one more concept before we jump into our code. This concept is JavaScript variables. Variables are containers for storing data values. We can create variables and assign a value to a variable by using a keyword, a variable name, and the equals operator. So here's an example. Var is the keyword signifying variable. Then we give our new variable a name. We're going to call it new variable. And the value of our new variable is going to be the string some string. So this line of code right here assigns the value some string to the variable new variable. Now this is important because we can then later in our code use this variable for other parts of our code. So this is a way to store one value in one place in our code and be able to use that value in a lot of other places throughout our code. Here's another example, var, meaning of life. So we've created a new variable called meaning of life with the assigned value of 42. So again, this assigns the value 42, which is a number, not a string, to the variable meaning of life. There are other ways we can assign variables, other keywords, const and let. We're not going to use those today. The one we're going to use today is var. All right, are we ready? Let's get coding. Before we do that, though, I'm going to show you kind of how our classes flow at Lambda School. Usually after we get to kind of a break point, a transition point, we might stop and take some questions. Sometimes we ask questions to our students. So I am going to send out this poll. Hey, there we go. Loving this. We're going to send out the next poll right here. So please jump onto Slido and fill out this survey. It's kind of a review of what we just practiced, what we just learned. Don't feel bad if you get wrong answers. Part of learning is putting in the effort, putting in the mental effort. Even if you get the answer wrong, by putting in that mental effort and then seeing the correct answer afterwards, you're actually going to learn that concept better than if you just sit at your computer and don't participate. So please jump onto Slido, slido.com, number 8581, and fill in this survey. Okay, I'll give you about 1 more minute to fill out this survey. About 20 more seconds. All right, let's see our results here. Yeah, very good. Looks like we got all 3 covered here: string, numbers, and functions. Great job. Let's take a look at the next question. What are the 3 main languages of the web? So it looks like we've got most of our answers here: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's correct. The rest of these are, oh, that one looks like it's a duplicate. I definitely meant to make this a wrong answer. So great job. We got most of our answers here. For these wrong answers, Java is a programming language, but it's not a language, one of the main languages of the web. And then tried to trick you here with HTTP instead of HTML. So great job. All right, what is the operator we use to assign a value to a variable? Very good. So var is the keyword. The operator we're looking for is the equal sign. Again, if you get an answer wrong, remember that the effort you put into answering the question, even if you get it wrong, actually helps you learn it now that you see, learn it better now that you see the correct answer. Even better than if you had not attempted this question. Okay, great job. I'm excited. This is really good. So let's go ahead and we can jump now to the code pen. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this calculator, I'm going to keep this starter code pen the same. So you can always go back to this event description, or you can star this, and you can come back and you can work through this again, even when we're done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this as our starter code, and I'm going to fork or make a copy of this code pen. And this is the code pen that I'm going to work on here. Now, if you get stuck, or while you're coding along with me, if you are getting errors or it doesn't look like what my code looks like, I'm going to post this here. Give me 1 second to pull up this on my end. Okay, there we go. In Slido, I have to hit save. There we go. In Slido, you'll see this link right over here. This is our catch-up link, meaning you can catch up to where I'm at in my code. So again, if you fall behind, or if something doesn't look right on your end and you just want to reset and catch up with where I'm at, you can just jump to Slido, click the catch-up link, and it will bring you to my code pen with all the edits that I have. Okay, so again, that's on Slido. Catch-up link right there on the left. Let's go ahead and get this started. Okay, we're going to follow these steps here to get this calculator working. Right now we just have a blank calculator, no functionality. We've got really cool styling, but that doesn't really help with the idea of having a calculator. So we need to write some JavaScript that's going to help us give this calculator some functionality. So the first thing we're going to do is create a function for clicking on the 1 button. What should this do when we click on the 1 button? The way we create a function is we type the keyword function. Go ahead and jump on CodePen and follow along with me. So I want you to type out the word function, and then we're going to give this function a name. So we're going to call this, let's just call this add1. Once we do the function keyword and the name of the function, we do parentheses here. These are different parentheses than invoking them. This is just defining or creating the function. So this is the syntax that we should have to create a function. Now I want you to put your cursor right in between the curly braces and hit enter. So this first line here, first line defines, or in other words, creates a function. And then you don't have to worry about typing this part inside, unless you want to. Inside the curly braces is the function body. This is where we tell the function what to do. You know what? Let me zoom in here a little bit. There we go. Make sure that you can see this well enough. Okay, so inside our curly braces, this is the function body. This is the function name. Inside the function body, this is where we get to tell our function what it's going to do. So we're going to take what I grabbed up here. I've used some JavaScript to grab our top bar here that has our current number that we're typing in. It'll hold the answer. This bar right here has been saved to this variable, a variable called display. And then you can see on in our code here that we're console logging the display. This is a really cool programming trick that we can look at the value of a variable anytime we type in console log, call that function with parentheses, and pass in some kind of value. So you'll notice in CodePen that you can click on the word console here, and it'll open up our console. So we're logging the value of this variable to our console. So what is display? What does this line of JavaScript do here? It grabs the HTML element, grabs this box element here from our website, and lets us use it in our JavaScript file. So if I pull down CSS a little bit here, we can see that this top line of HTML, which is our calculator display, this display up at the top, that's exactly what is being console logged from these two lines of code. Now, notice that this line of HTML has these are called attributes, has an attribute called value. Let's console log display.value. So on line 3, I want you to type in inside your console log display.value. And you'll notice that this gives us the value 0, exactly what we see right here in our screen. Isn't that awesome? We're able to grab an element from our website, console log it, and get the value of what's inside this part of our screen right here, this display. So the reason I wanted to go through that is so we know what add1 is going to do. We want to take display.value, and we want to give display.value a new value. I'm going to close my console for now. So we're going to take this variable and we're going to assign it a new value. And the value we wanted to assign it is display dot value plus 1. So I'll pause here for a moment, and I want you to build out this add one function. Okay, so this is good. However, we don't have any way to call this function. We don't have any way to invoke this function so it can perform its task of taking the current display value, adding 1 to it, and then taking that new value that we're creating and updating our display.value. We're updating this number right here with whatever this is going to equal out to be. So in order to get this function to be invoked or be called or executed when we click on the 1 button, we need to go to our HTML and we need to add an on-click event handler to the 1 button element inside that HTML file. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to scroll this to the top, and there. So this, oh, jumping around on me. There we go. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to add an on-click event handler to the 1 button. So here's our HTML. Here's our 1 button. We're going to add a new attribute. It'll look a lot like this. It'll have the attribute name. It'll have an equal sign, and then it'll have some string behind it. So we're going to say on click. This tells our browser to do something, what we tell it to do when we click on that 1 button. So we're going to say one on click equals, we want it to invoke or call this add 1 function. So inside our strings here, we're going to do add 1. And do you remember how to invoke a function? We talked about this just a minute ago. We want to invoke this function. And the way we invoke functions is with an open and close parenthesis. All right, so now when we click on this 1 button, it's going to execute this code here. This code invokes this function. So we're going to execute this line of code right here. So let's try it out. Here we go. This is the fun part of programming, is seeing it start to work. Oh, uh-oh. That doesn't look right. Let me ask a question on Slido. So if you go back to Slido, can you tell me why this code didn't work? We're supposed to be adding, if we refresh our page here, let me save everything and then refresh. So we're supposed to be, when we click on this 1 button, we're supposed to be adding 0 plus 1. And then if we click on it again, we should take 1 plus 1 and it should show 2. But this is what's showing up. So can you tell me, from what we've looked at today so far, why our calculator is behaving this way instead of actually adding these together? Ah, yes, very good. The value, if we look at this, if we look at where we're console log display.value, Notice that display.value is a string. So even if we take a string, if we take the string 0 and we add the number 1 to it, we get the string 0, 1. And this is what we're trying to do. We're mixing JavaScript types, and our browser is forcing this number to become a string with this string here. So let's go ahead and fix this. Instead of adding our string with a number, we're going to do a little JavaScript trick here. We're going to pass in a number, the number 1, to our function. Got some really great answers here. Thank you. Yes. I love it. Great job. Okay, so we're going to pass a number into our function, and we can capture that number inside these parentheses here. So we're going to call this 1. This is kind of, you can think of this as kind of a mini variable capturing whatever we pass into this function here. So instead of saying display.value, which is a string, plus 1, we're going to say 1 plus 1. And now, let me refresh the page here. There we go. So now we're taking this variable plus 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So we're basically doing this, 1 plus 1. That's why it stays at 2 every time we click on the 1 number, because it's always setting display.value to the number 2. Let's do one more. So we added the onClick event. Let's come down here and create a function for clicking the to button. And just like I would in my normal Lambda class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you look at this add one function, and I want you to create an add to function for clicking the to button. So you're going to define your function. You're going to use curly braces. And inside those curly braces, you're going to do something similar here, but for adding to. And then don't forget to come into your HTML, find the to button, and add your onClick. So I will set a little timer here for, let's say, 3 minutes for you to practice this, creating this function on your own. All right, I'll see you back in 3 minutes. All right, about 30 seconds left. Okay, there we go. How'd you do? Were you able to get that working? If not, again, that is totally fine. This is we're doing this together so that you can start practicing these things. And as you see me do it, and you'll learn it better if you're giving that effort. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function called add2. This is going to take in the number 2. Now, this is kind of an interesting piece here in JavaScript. We could name this whatever we want. This could be we could call this banana, and we could set display.value equal to banana. We usually like to keep our names a little bit more descriptive of what the thing actually is, though. So we're going to call this 2. And I'm going to do something a little bit differently. You probably did 2 plus 1 or 2 plus 2. I'm going to say display.value is going to equal just the number 2. Okay, now let's go ahead and in our HTML, we need some way to call this function, just like we did for add1. So inside our HTML, on this input here with the button with the name 2, we're going to add an onClick, if I could spell. And then inside our onClick, we're going to invoke add2, and we're going to pass in the number 2. So let's kind of do the same thing here with add1. Let's change this so it's not adding a number yet, but it's just going to change our display.value to the number 1. And now we can kind of go back and forth between 1 and 2. Isn't that awesome? It's starting to come together. Okay, this is where things get really exciting. In programming, we have this idea called dry programming. Let me type this in down here. Dry programming stands for don't repeat yourself. Okay, we want to make our code as dry as we can. However, if you notice up here, we're kind of repeating things over and over again. And if we wanted to create functions for all 9 number buttons here, we would have a lot of functions. We'd have 9 different functions that basically look the same, with only these values being a little bit different and then the name being a little bit different. So what if I told you we could build one function that could work for all 9 buttons? If we take this pattern here and we make it what we call this making it more dynamic, if we take this function pattern, we can create a single dynamic function that can handle any, we're going to call this number button clicks. So type this out with me. We're going to create a function. We're going to call this click num. Num is kind of the programming shorthand name for number. So we're going to have one function that we're going to invoke anytime we click on any number button. And for this, we're going to take in the number that we're clicking on, and we're going to break a rule that we just talked about for a second, then we'll fix it. Inside this function, we're going to say the display.value. We're going to update our display.value, which is this number here, to display dot value plus our number. Whatever number we're passing in here. Okay, Dustin, we just did this with our add one, and it didn't work, right? It did. Oh, we can't show it yet because we haven't, we're not invoking this anywhere. Let's go replace add one and add two in our HTML with click num. So inside our HTML, we're going to replace add one with click num. We're going to replace add two with click num. And now look. But wait a second. This is the behavior that we just said we didn't want. But actually, if you think about using a calculator, this is exactly how a calculator works, right? If I wanted to type in the number 12, let me reset here. If I wanted to go to use a calculator right now and type in the number 12, I'd click 1, 2. And there we go. We have the number 12 there. So we actually, for this click num function, we actually do want to take a string plus whatever number we're passing it in, and we want to combine those into a single string. And that's what we're doing here. But notice that we have this 0 still. So let's look at how our calculator starts. It starts with the number 0. We're going to use a really cool part of JavaScript called an if-then statement. If/then statement. This gives us the ability to check something, and based on what that something returns, based on that statement, that condition, do one thing, or if that condition is different than what we say inside these parentheses, do something else. So let me show you what I mean. I want you to type out if, and then parentheses, and then curly braces. And again, we're going to go in between our two curly braces and hit enter. So we're inside this block of code here. And the way an if-then statement works is we say if, and then in here some condition. We're going to say if display dot value. Now here's a cool operator. Equals equals equals. Isn't that funny? If our display dot value equals the string 0, so if this equals this, notice we're using triple equals here because a single equals updates this value. We don't want to update this value. We just want to check to see if display.value equals 0, like it's showing right here. If that's true, then we're going to do this. We're going to say display.value. Now we're updating the value with just the number. So we're not going to take the string 0 plus our number. What we're going to do is we're going to take the number that we're passing in here, and we're going to assign that number to display value. Okay, after this if block, so if we're here, then we're going to remove the 0 by executing this line of code. This is an if-else block, if-else statement. Otherwise, we'll do this part here. So I'm going to cut and paste that. So again, when we call this function, when we invoke this function, let's look at this one line at a time. We're saying if our display.value equals 0, we don't want this 0 in front of our numbers. We just want it to equal the number that's coming in to this function from our HTML. That way, if we click on 1, we get 1 by itself without that 0 in front of it. Okay, otherwise, if display.value does not equal 0, then we want to take what it was before and add our number to it. Okay, so now that we have this function built out, we're going to go to our HTML. We've got click num here on our 1 button and 2 button. Let's copy this and paste it onto every single number button. So be careful, there are some inputs, there are some buttons here that are operators and not numbers. So find all the ones whose value is a number. We're going to copy and paste our onClick handler. Scroll down a little bit more. We've got 7, 8, 9 down here. Then we have to go through all of these and pass in the correct number based on which button we're looking at. So again, copy this onClick handler here, paste it behind the value attribute of each button, and then once you have all the number buttons with an onClick handler, we're going to update the numbers we're passing in to that function. Now, let's see what our calculator does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I missed the 0 button. We got to find the 0 button way down here. Yes. Woo! Ah, this is so good. Okay. We just have 2 more parts left. We need to do the same thing that our click number button is doing with our operator symbols. And then we need to get our clear button working and our equals button working. So we check to see if the button clicked or when, if the button clicked and the value is currently 0. We did that right here. So the next thing we're going to do is create a function for the clear button. So we're going to say click clear, function click clear. Again, put your cursor inside those curly braces and hit enter. And what do you think the clear button is supposed to do? If we have some numbers typed into here, when we click clear, we just want the display to go back to 0, right? So we can say display.value. We can set that back to 0. And let's even make this a string. So inside click clear, we're going to say display.value is going to receive a new value, which is the string 0. Okay, see if you can think of where we can invoke this function. What have we done with all these functions up here to be able to invoke them when we click on these buttons? We have to add it to our HTML, right? So our click clear function should be added to our clear button right here. You can look at the ID or the name. So we're going to say on click equals, we're going to click clear. Now this function's a little bit different. We don't actually need to pass in a number. It doesn't have to take any kind of number into this function here. All we want to do is when we click on the clear button is set the value to 0. Okay, again, if you need to catch up, just jump onto Slido and click the catch up link right here. And then you'll be back to exactly where I'm at in this project. All right, we are so close. This is looking so good. So we can type in any number here. We can click the clear button. But now we need to make the actual math functions work, the math operations work for this function. So this is what we're going to do. The idea here is that we want, let's say we click the button 5, and then we click the plus sign, and then we click the 5 button again. What we want to do is we actually want to create a string that looks like this. And then we're going to do some really cool JavaScript to evaluate this string as if they were numbers. JavaScript can do that. It's very, very cool. So if we take the string 5 and we add the string plus, this is what we get. So the string 5 is going to come from display.value. So when let's go here. I'm going to shrink this for a minute. Okay, we're going to create a function for the plus button. Let's call this function. We're going to say click operator. And this is going to, we're going to receive a specific operator. Again, we could name this banana, we could name this foobar, but we want this to kind of represent what we're passing into here. So we're going to call this operator. And we're going to take the display.value, which is going to be, if we had first clicked on 5, let me close that down. There we go. If we first click on 5, we're going to take that string 5. So we're going to take display.value. We're going to add to that string whatever operator we click on. And that's it. That's all we have to do for click operator. So now let's go to our plus button. Let me pause here for a second because I want you to be able to catch up and stay with me here. Okay, let's take our click operator button. Let's find our click operator function. We're going to call this function when we click on the plus button. So on click, when we click on the plus, we're going to call click operator. We call a function again by invoking parentheses. And then we're going to pass in the string plus. So we're going to pass in this character, the plus character, as a string to this function. So operator becomes this string here. And we're basically doing this. We're basically taking, if we clicked on 5, we're taking the string 5 plus the string with the plus character in it. And that's going to return to us a single string that looks like that. So let's save that. Let's click on 5 and click on plus. Oh, got an error here. Let's see what's going on. Unexpected end of input. May need to do that. 5 plus. Nope. It's not liking something here. Click operator. Index.html. This is the fun part about programming. You run into a little bug like this and you have to figure out what is causing the problem. So a lot of times this comes from misspelling things. So I want to make sure that my function is spelled exactly the same in both places. Okay, that looks correct. We're passing in the string plus. Okay. I know what's wrong. So this double quotation mark here is closing this double quotation mark. So we actually have to change the double quotes inside here to single quotes. So there's some intricacies there, things that you'll learn at Lambda School and why that's happening and how to debug that. But if you take your onClick and do your double quotes on the outside and single quotes on the inside, it should fix this error. So let's try this again. 5 plus. There we go. That's what we wanted. That's what we were looking for. Let's take this string now, and let's take that string and we'll add the string 5 to it by clicking the 5 button again. So we're going to say 5 plus 5. Hey, look at that. We could keep this up all day. We're just creating this long string for our display. But once we have a full mathematical function here, we want to click equals, and we want this to be set equal to whatever this math function evaluates to. So we're going to come down here to our last line, and we're going to create a function for the equals button. So we're going to call this function getTotal. Your syntax for functions is going to be the same every time. You've got the keyword function, the name, parentheses, and then curly braces. And we're going to, again, put your cursor inside the curly braces and hit enter. And now we're going to do some JavaScript. So we're going to say our display.value. We want to update what we're looking at here. And I want you to type in exactly what I type. We don't have time for me to explain it, and it's probably, this line of code is probably a little more in depth than what we want to look at today. So we're going to say eval. This is a function that is native to JavaScript. So we can call this, and we're going to evaluate display.value. Basically what this line of code does is it takes a string that looks like this, 5 plus 5, and when we evaluate that, it's going to return the number 10. Again, a little bit more advanced technique going on here, but this is how we're going to be able to get our total when we hit enter. So let's take this function and wire it up to our HTML. So the function is called getTotal. We want this to work right here on our do it button, the one that has the value of equals. We don't need to pass anything into this function, so we're just going to invoke it. Notice that there's nothing being passed into this function. When we click on the equal button, it's going to evaluate our current display.value, and it's going to take whatever our string is, and it's going to evaluate the numbers inside that string and give us the total. So let's do 5 plus 5 equals 10. Woo! We did it. Let's do plus 6 equals. Okay, let's try this. If we clear, if we do 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, we should see 8. Ah, awesome. Awesome, awesome. The very last thing that we would want to do here is take this click operator. We don't have this working for our minus, multiplication, or division. So we're going to take that same click operator. If you scroll up to your plus button and just copy this whole on click part, add it to each operator. So we're going to add it to the minus operator. We're going to add it to the times operator. And we're going to add it to the divide operator. And then, of course, we have to replace the value we're passing into click operator with the operator that corresponds with that button. You know what that is by looking at what's in the value for that element. Okay, so again, we want to take our click operator. Every time we click on any of these operator buttons, we want to invoke our click operator function with the correct operator. What that's going to do is it's going to take our current value and it's going to create a new string that includes our operator. So 5 plus the string plus equals this string here. So let's see if this works. 4 times 5 equals 20. Minus 5 equals 15. Divided by 3. Woo! And there we go. We have our fully functional, fully working calculator. By the way, be careful of order of operations. This eval function down here for our get total does follow order of operations. So if you do something like 2 plus 3 times 5, you're not going to get 5 times 5. That would equal 25. You're going to get 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 2, which is 17. So be a little careful on that. The very last thing, and then I can stick around for questions if you have questions on Slido. I've been watching and I haven't seen any questions come in, but I'm happy to take questions. Last thing that I want to do is, this isn't going to quite work on our calculator. Maybe I can draw this out. You know what? Nope, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed what you saw here, I would encourage you to look deeper into Lambda School. The great thing about Lambda School is you don't pay any tuition until you get a high-paying job, making $50,000 or more. We've helped thousands of students, over 1,000 students, get jobs at companies including Apple, Uber, Amazon, Microsoft. So please, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Lambda School, click on the link in the description or go to lambdaschool.com. If you want to learn more, you can go to that website. You can attend more of our events. We have more events like this. We've got open houses where you can ask questions. You can always talk to an enrollment advisor. Or if you liked what you saw today and you enjoyed writing that JavaScript, then I would encourage you to start an application, and hopefully I'll get to see you in class soon. Okay, have a great night. If you're jumping off, if you'd like to stick around for questions, jump onto the Slido here. Let me close down our poll. Oh, here we go. So we do have a question. Okay, great. Jump onto Slido. You can type your question in here, and we will see those questions pop up on my screen here. Can you explain the HTML tags used, like TD, TR, and input? Yeah, great question. So again, our focus today was JavaScript, but now that we are finished with that, we can talk a little bit about our HTML. So notice that wrapping all of these things is a table. And you can think of a table in HTML a lot like a spreadsheet. So the way that we create spreadsheets in an HTML table is by using a table row. And we could have multiple table rows. And then inside each table row, we'll have table data elements, which are basically the column for each row. So that's how you create like a spreadsheet-like table inside HTML. We didn't really create a table here. We just used that for kind of structuring our calculator. And then these inputs are the buttons that we see here. So we could have used an actual button element, but I opted to use an input element of the type button. So that they're basically interchangeable. Input type button will be the same or similar to a button element. Inputs are also used for like form inputs, where you have a form that you type in your first name and last name and email and password. You can use inputs for those kind of form elements as well. Great question. Thank you so much. Was it necessary to use any semicolons for this project? And if not, does JavaScript use them? Yeah, you may have seen me add some semicolons here or there. I didn't start out with semicolons, and so I didn't want to make it confusing, so I deleted them pretty quickly. It's not necessary. Semicolons are only absolutely necessary in some very kind of one-off cases in your code. So we can actually do most JavaScript things. Oh, see here, I did leave this semicolon at the end of this line here. We can actually do most things in JavaScript without semicolons. And there's a couple up here. What a semicolon in JavaScript means is it tells the JavaScript engine that this line is done. So we're not going to do anything else beyond on this line of code beyond what's in front of the semicolon. However, your browser can take a line of JavaScript, can take multiple lines of JavaScript, and it doesn't actually need semicolons to know that the line is done, except in a few kind of side cases that are pretty rare in JavaScript code. So it's okay to do everything we did today without any semicolons, or if you wanted semicolons, we could put them at the end of each of these lines, like so. It's again not going to make a difference either way. Okay, really great question again. Another question, do you have to be a citizen to enroll? Right now, we are operating inside the United States only. We only have support for helping you get a job inside the US. And outside of the US, there are a lot of laws and regulations regarding schools like ours. And so we're always working to expand outside of the US, but right now we are just enrolling students inside the US. Now, if you're inside the US and not a citizen, then there are potentials there for you to enroll in Lambda School. I would ask you to talk to an enrollment advisor and kind of explain your situation. The reason there being we want to help you get a job after Lambda School. That's the point of coming to Lambda School, is to switch careers and get that high-paying tech job. So if citizenship is going to get in the way of that, then you'll want to talk to an enrollment advisor and let them know your situation. Okay, looks like they followed up and said they go to school here and looking for a job in the U.S. Yeah, again, talk to enrollment advisors. They'll honestly have a lot more knowledge with your specific case. Okay, great questions. Can you explain what the else if statements are used for? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sammy. In JavaScript, we can do some conditional code. So an if-else statement, let's do this, allows us to run some code based on certain conditions. So right here, we are checking this condition. We only want to run this code inside our if statement if this condition is met. If this condition is not met, then we jump into our else block and we run this code here. So in an if-else statement, only one block of code is going to be run. We're not going to run both of these. Only one of these gets run at a time. So your browser, as it's executing this JavaScript, it will get to this line of code when we click on a number, and it will check this condition. Is display.value, does it currently equal the string 0? If this condition is met, if that's true, then we're going to replace our value with the number instead of concatenating 0 plus 1, because that would give us the string 0, 1. And we don't want to see that 0 in front of our numbers. So instead, we say if the value is 0, don't add 0 plus our number. But if the value is anything else but 0, go ahead and take our current display value and add our new number to the end of it. So when I click on let's click the for button, we're going to invoke this function. We're going to check, we're going to see that this is true, and we're going to replace that 0 with the number 4. If I now click on the 6 button, we're going to invoke this function again. We're going to check this condition again, but this time it's false. So we skip this line of code and we come down to our else block. And we see we're going to update our value with our current display value, which is the string 4, plus the string 6 to get 46. Thanks for the great question, Sammy. And thank you so much. This was a really fun lesson. I really enjoyed it. I love teaching, and I hope that this gives you a little bit of insight into what lessons are like here at Lambda School. Doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we will go ahead and jump off. Have a wonderful night and hope to see you in class soon.